All right, everyone, let's get started with this review. I guess we really hemorrhaged people, didn't we? Well, we can start. They'll join us. Yeah, I don't know. Where's everyone? Nobody wants to hear me talk. That's fine. You don't have to listen. You can put in your headphones. It's all okay. So let's start. And let's start by, I have this to-do list, and this is kind of done already. And I want to collect questions first. So what parts of this tripped you up? Or would you like me to walk through? Yeah, Sarah?
Just like so I felt like I a lot of times was unclear where the action was taking place. Not like the action, but like where things were getting done. Like was it in the reducer? Was it in the store.dispatch? Was it in the action creator? Like where, or is it just a combination of everything? I don't know.
Yeah, so with Redux, what happens where?
Yeah.
And the short answer is like the majority of stuff happens in the reducer, and asynchronous stuff happens in your thunks, sometimes also called dispatchers because they are things that call dispatch. But we'll walk through that with the lyrics example and then probably a couple of more. Okay, so more questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We discovered that there was a pattern of in our main app container.
Yep.
We kept on having to import the action creators.
Yep.
And they call the reducers using those action creators.
Call the reducers using those action creators?
Well, if the reducers operate on the action.
Or dispatch. Yeah.
So, do the reducers kind of run different systems?
Yeah, so this, I'm going to sort of say this is an associated question, which is like, how exactly do the action creators bind to the reducers? Yeah, and
I think I understand that clarification.
yeah, and that happens here. Okay, so here is my store setup. I'm going to make it a little bit more readable here. Okay, so this like compose enhancers nonsense is because of the Redux DevTools extension. I literally copy and pasted that out of the Redux DevTools blog just so that, or README, just so that I could have it work and have that time traveling capability. So I'm going to ignore this, sort of. And then this is something from before. It's not used anymore. So this is where the reducers get bound. Basically, like you have to pass them in to the store when it's created, and then from that point on, that store, any action that you dispatch, it's going to send to the reducer. And I said reducers accidentally because like I'm using combined reducers here, which means we could have multiple functions. But as far as the store is concerned, there is only one reducer, and combined reducers just takes a bunch of functions and returns one function that amalgamates all of them. So as far as Redux is concerned, there is a reducer, and it gets called every time you dispatch to figure out what the next state should be.
As long as we just make sure every time we write a new reducer, we add it to the combined reducers.
Yeah, so right now my combined reducers call has this one nested reducer in it. So like arguably not the most useful call to combine reducers ever. But yeah, if I want to have another part of my state, which is managed by another reducer, which I think we're about to see, then I'll add another thing to combine reducers and make sure it's there. Yeah, if I don't add it, then no, my state is not going to include that reducer state. I think of reducers as sort of owning the state that they're reducing over, right? They consume it and they emit it, and like other things like are looking at it, like your whole app is dependent on it, but the reducer is really the thing that is responsible for it and is responsible for making sure that it updates appropriately. Yeah. Other questions? Okay, so I have, unlike before, I have sort of started this already. I kind of have a working lyrics search, although it looks pretty ugly. But maybe it always looks this way, I don't know. And maybe it doesn't always quite work. I just did it, so there could be some surprising bugs. So I'm gonna walk through, like, kind of fast this part, and slow me down if there's anything you want me to dwell on or explain a bit more. And then we can do, like, maybe we'll take a poll which parts of the rest of the app you want to see refactored. Because I think going through all of it in the next 45 minutes is probably a bit ambitious. We can try it, but it might just be a blur of me, like, trying to code while you all stare at me. Okay, so let's first see if my thing is working. Is my thing working? See, chandelier. Yay, it does. Does it work for any other song? This is something I... Oh yeah, okay, great. Okay, so how does it work? Well, what is happening in Redux land? Let's see. Why do I not have my Redux DevTools available to me here? Is it because they were installed in my other Chrome? Let's find out. I have two Chrome profiles. One is a personal profile, and one is my Grace Hopper profile, and I think maybe my personal profile has the DevTools. Yep, there they are. I have the React DevTools on one account and the Redux DevTools on the other. That's great. If anyone knows a shorter song title, by the way. Maps. Oh yeah, that would have been good. But then I have to type yeah, yeah, yes. Okay, so if I look at my Redux store, I see that I'm getting actions and they're working as expected. So great. Okay, so let's just walk through how that's working. So the first thing I did was I set up my store. And in my store, I do this sort of boilerplate stuff. I attach this logger middleware because we're going to use it to, don't want that. Because that's going to just print these nice messages telling me when I transition from one state to another. I bring in this lyrics reducer, and I'm passing it to combine reducers. The lyrics reducer is responsible for managing the state, the lyrics part of the state, which is just a string. I believe that's true in the workshop too. It's just a string that is like the lyrics text. And I set this up because it's such a simple reducer. I was driven to use crazy one-liners, so I'll maybe like walk this back one optimization and then explain it. So here I have both my action creators and my reducer in this one file. I was just about to peel them into different files, but I also kind of like how this puts all the lyrics related stuff in one place, so I wasn't hyper motivated to do that. So this first part is the action creator. It returns a set lyrics action object, and this is my reducer, which takes the current state, which by default will be an empty string, and then takes an action. So I could have said this, action.type, and action.lyrics. And if the type is set lyrics, it sets the lyrics. Otherwise, it does not set the lyrics. So it's like the simplest reducer you can imagine that does anything. And the way I had it before, I was just pulling out type and lyrics from the action so that I didn't have to say action dot using destructuring. So I'll keep both in there for the solution. Change this back to action, action.type, and action.lyrics. Okay. Okay, so I have my reducer. And I have my store. If I feel so inclined, I can test this in the way that we've tested things before. I saying here's my store, export default store, and then I'll just throw it on the window, store, and lifted store? What is that? I'm not, oh, interesting. We're not gonna dive into that, although I'm very curious about what that is. So my state is, get state. So my state is empty, and if I dispatch set lyrics with lyrics, they don't love you like I love you. Then, hilariously, everything updates. I mean, unsurprisingly, but all my views update. I can just like poke whatever I want into them, which is kind of fun. Okay, so I'm reasonably content that my store is working, and now I can write my views. So where do I do that? Really, no, what am I writing? It's a lyrics container, right? Okay. So let's start with the container part. I again haven't like pulled the dumb component out yet. The dumb component is this thing up top. So the lyrics container, I think the workshop recommended calling gets, like store.getState here, which we can also do. Either is fine. We'll do that. Honestly, like before the component is mounted, it doesn't really matter what the state is, just that the state is not null and has what we expect on it so that nothing in render throws, because we're trying to get something that isn't there. So when I mount, I'm going to subscribe to the store, and when I unmount, I'm going to call the unsubscribe function that subscribe returned. In my render, I return my lyrics dumb component, which takes these various props, so that when I type something into the artist field, it's going to call set artist. When I type something into the song field, it's going to call set song. And when I hit submit, it's going to call handle submit, and that's where I do this get request. So I still haven't refactored this to use thunk. So that's probably maybe next up on our to-do list. You probably saw in the workshop the dumb component code. So since you saw the less crazy dumb component code, here is crazier dumb component code, where instead of having a function in here where we're declaring like artist change and whatnot, oops, remember how this is how it looked? Blah, blah, blah. Instead of that, I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to to get it so that I can just implicitly return something and not have to have curly brackets. This is maybe not a completely sane thing on my part, but I really like it. And so I'm taking some additional props, which actually are not going to get passed in, and I'm specifying default values for them, which depend on other props. So this song change, which I'm using here, is actually just a function that takes an event and calls setSong, which is going to be this setSong. This is something you can do. You can have default arguments that reference other props or other arguments. But again, if I didn't want to do this, I could just move these into the function body and maybe have less insanity in my life. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Questions on this flow? I think most of this code was sort of given to you in hints in the workshop. Does everyone feel like you have a pretty good sense of like what is happening where, like what is responsible for doing each piece here? Maybe. Would it help to walk through it in like a debugger or like sort of watching what's going on kind of way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So let's do that. Let me think for a second how the best way to debug this will be. I bet in, let's actually do it here. Okay, so whenever artist change happens or song change happens, I could regret this. Let's find out. I may regret this because I'm not completely sure that we're going to get into the code in a reasonable place, but I think we may. So let's try it. Okay, so here's my lyrics search container. I think I might actually regret this because this is going to fire too often, but that's okay. We can fix that. So T. Okay, so the moment I change either of these, one of these is going to get called, right? So like I just changed the artist, and so artist change got called, and lo, here I am in a debugger. Fabulous. Which means, so the next thing that's going to happen is that set artist is going to get called. So let me try and step into that. Yep. Okay, so we went from, can everyone see this? Is this big enough? It's not. Yeah, it's not big enough. Okay. I wish this was in my editor. It can be. I just, what's that? Visual Studio Code can actually do that. It can attach to this and use and like be a debugger. I just haven't figured that out yet. Okay, so we just went from here. Let's see. Oh, this is okay. So this is inside of React. Okay, so inside of React, we've gotten this event that I hit the letter T inside of this input, and so we get artist change called, which is defined here, which means we're going to call our prop set artist, which was passed in from the smart component, and set artist just takes the string that we have typed, which is T, and calls set state with artist with that string. So right now our state is going to be, it's going to have artist query as T. And I think, let's see, so step into, okay, so let's just keep running. Okay, and every time I do that, it's going to keep updating the state of this component. I'm wishing I had the Redux tools so that I could see the state of this component, but maybe step into, okay, let's see if we can actually do it. What is this? Really? Why? We're about to call this. So usually when you're in the debugger, you can actually go into the console here and then access things from the inner scope. So maybe so I can. The thing that I can't do is access this. I don't know why. I guess the debugger is not that smart. Probably this it's trying to use has not been bound by an arrow because, well, I don't know why, but it's the console, not actually the inside of an arrow function. But what I can do is I can look at it here and look at its state and be like, okay, here's its current state, which is TEG. I just typed an A, so it's going to update that to be artist query TEGA. T again has not yet been typed out. So that's what happens when I'm typing stuff in. And then when I finally submit, let's go through that process because that's more interesting, I think. No, oh, we want the debugger. We don't want this one. And we don't want this one. Okay, so reloading. Great, so yeah, oh, so now I'm going to search for, so now that I've like done this typing, and if I looked at the state of this smart component, its state would have, which we're about to do actually, its state's going to have an artist query and a song query, which are equal to what I've just typed, already loaded. And when I click search, damn it. This debugger is not going to get called for reasons that I don't understand. Here, let's do it in here. Handle submit is going to say debugger, and then, okay. Actually, another thing you can do, you can just click on the sidebar, and you don't have to throw debugger statements all over the place. Because as we're observing, they're not always that reliable. Okay, so, oh, interesting. Apparently, I can decide where on the line I want to break, which is pretty interesting. I'm going to leave it where it is. I'm going to say, okay, please look for this song. Okay, great. So I clicked submit. It went through a little bit of a winding path to get here, but this handle submit, oh, actually, this handle submit is this function, I guess. So fabulous. And so now we're going to do the get and then get into the .then. So let's see if I can, yeah. Let's see if I can break on inside of this .then. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. Yay. Okay, so now we should have the response. Is this true? Scope, call stack. So I'm supposed to be inside of handle submit. Here, let's just step a little bit. Step into. Here, let's see what I have. Do I have response? No. Where am I? I think I broke too late. I broke too late. Okay. Let's actually put a debugger here. Sorry, man. Actually, let's not do it there. Let's do it here. Okay, so same song and dance. So I should be able to continue here and then hit this debugger after we have a response. Okay, now we're actually in the .then of a response, which is going to be a sane place to be. Here's our response object. It has response.data.lyric. So let's actually step into this function. So this is kind of like, this is where we start jumping into Redux land. And we're going to debug all of these stack frames, including the Redux one, so we can sort of see what it is Redux is doing and how eventually the new state gets broadcast out. Okay, so stepping into this, first we call our action creator. That's not surprising. And it's just going to return this object. So does it tell me what it returned? No, but I think you can trust that the action creator does what it says it does. You step into dispatch, and oh man, pretty print this minimized file. Yeah, do that. How do I do that? More on the bottom status bar. Sweet. That's, I mean, this is not the greatest still. I don't know what IFT is, but it's better than nothing. Man, why is it minified? Oh, I'm so sad about this. Oh, this is the DevTools extension. This is where we are. Okay, well, we're going to keep going. This looks like Redux. this is, okay, so now we're in Redux logger. Okay, so let's actually step back um, 1 second. I called Lyrics container and I immediately got into the DevTools dispatch. Can anyone surmise, like, I didn't enter Redux and then get to the DevTools. It's like immediately DevTools, and then after that, immediately the logger. What on earth is going on? How does anything know that this is where, like, how does dispatch know that this is where it should go? Mm-hmm. So it's, yeah, so it is definitely, it's in some way dependent on how we configured the store, for sure. Yeah, so we're in the middleware. We got straight into the middleware the moment we called dispatch, which is, it's like a little bit surprising, or I would be a little bit surprised, because I would expect store.dispatch to be some function that, like, you call it, and then it's like, what middleware do I have active? Oh, I guess I have the logger middleware. I should call the logger middleware with this action. That is not actually how Redux middleware works. Redux middleware, when you write it, you actually write a new dispatch function that takes the old dispatch function as one of its parameters. In fact, I think as its only parameter. And thereby, you can, so you do whatever you want to the action, and then when you're done with it, or when you have another action to pass along, you call the old dispatch on it. And so so like when we're calling store.dispatch and we have middleware active, we're actually calling the first middlewares, we're calling the first middleware, which then knows about the next middleware, and then the last middleware has the original dispatch function from the store. Yeah, they just like eat each other. That's why when you compose middleware together, there's like a compose enhancers or just a compose function. That's like not a Redux special function. That's just a function that composes other functions together. Such. What is composed from? I mean, it's part of Redux, but it's not special. Like you can use Redux as compose to do like arbitrary functions, such that to compose a chain of arbitrary functions. Okay, little bit of a digression, but an interesting one. So here's our logger. It's doing all this logging stuff. Wow, this is a much more complicated logger than I expected. But basically, it's time stamping it and then printing it in a pretty way. Okay, let's kind of blow through this. And we're going to blow through this until, here, let's see, next. Okay, so notice that next is going to be the next dispatch function. So I'm going to watch for where next is getting called. Probably here. And let's see. Yep, so I'm going to step into this, which will get me into the next middleware, or maybe into Redux itself. This is, where am I? We are back into, we're back into the DevTools middleware. And now I don't know where we are. Oh, so now we are actually inside of, this definitely looks like the Redux source, but it's confusing to me because, okay, let's keep going. This is, so I'm sort of like staring at this confused because this definitely looks like Redux. Redux will throw exceptions like this if you try and like dispatch something that is not a plain object. But on the other hand, we appear to be inside of the DevTools source file. This is definitely the file that like was DevTools up here. Yeah. So not completely sure. Let's keep going. Step into the next function call. This is it. This is Redux. Okay. Oh, so this is the Redux source now. Notice that we're in create_store.js. That's part of the Redux source tree. And these are the errors that Redux will throw if you try and dispatch things that are not normal actions. Okay, DevTools done. So our action type, our action has a type. We are not currently dispatching. This is an important check that Redux does to make sure that you are not trying to call dispatch from inside of your reducer, which it disallows. And then it is dispatching to true, and then it's going to call our reducer. So let's step into this. Okay, now we're probably inside of some god-awful thing. Current reducer. Okay. We're going to weather this. We're going to get through it. It looks like what?
The DevTools again.
Yeah, it does look like the DevTools, doesn't it? I'm wondering how the DevTools ended up here. Like, the DevTools just binds as middleware, which I don't think gets to change the reducer. But honestly, yeah, I almost want to turn off the debugger and do this again, or turn off DevTools and do this again, because the DevTools code is like super freaky. In fact, let's try that. Let's kill anything except our reducer. Okay. Okay, so try this again. Okay, now let's step into store.dispatch. Action creator again. I did not recompile fast enough. Okay, here we are. Now we have gotten rid of our middleware, so we immediately end up inside of Redux's dispatch function. Redux's dispatch function checks some stuff like, is this a plain object? Are we dispatching? We are dispatching now, and then it calls our reducer, which now we're inside of combined reducers, which is a little bit exciting code-wise, but hopefully won't, let's see, hopefully it won't be too hard to find the moment where it calls our reducer. So what's happening? If we're inside production, okay, we're not in production, so I'm going to ignore that. It grabs the current state, it grabs the current action. Oh, I guess we are not production, so that's fine. There's no warning message. Nothing's changed. It's doing some loop over this object that we specified, which kind of you would expect that, right? Like combined reducers is going to have to look at that object and call or dispatch the action to every reducer that we specified. So that's what it's doing here. I'm kind of just, yeah. So here's where it's like, it's doing some sort of key manipulation. We could talk out what it's doing. You could think about like what it has to do. But here I see that it's calling something called the reducer, and oh look, it's about to call into lyrics.js. So I'm just gonna step into that. And here we are, here's our reducer. So now we have our current state, which is undefined, and wait, that's surprising. Oh yeah, our current state, which is the empty string, that's less surprising. And then I keep hitting that key, drat. My one-liner was too hard to step through. But anyway, the next state for key, oh god. So our reducer took the empty string and this action and returned this state. And now combined reducers is going to do a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so we'll step over some stuff, step over, and then return the whole kind of amalgamated state. So now we're back into Redux. This is Redux's dispatch function. Is that right? Yeah, dispatch is an action. It is the only way to trigger a state change. And now we're going to call into all of our listeners. So what is this listener? Can you tell me? Can you tell me? I have 2 listeners. Is this the one I want? I have 2 listeners both inside lyrics container. That's kind of not good, but okay. I'm going to step into this. And here we are. So, so it seems kind of crazy, right? We went through that whole crazy path just to get this piece of data from here to here. But the reason we went through that whole crazy path is because the data went to a centralized place and then came back down to us. And from that centralized place can also go to everywhere else that wants it. So that's how, I have 2, that's why I have 2 of these. I have 2 lyrics containers on the page, and they're both listening. So after this state gets set, I can't even scroll the page. So the exact same thing is about to happen for my other component. And, sorry, now we're in React land, and we're not going to go through what setting state on a component has to do. So that's the general flow. You dispatch something, it hits all the middleware, and then it hits Redux's dispatch function. And Redux's dispatch function literally just calls the reducer, gets the next state, and then calls all the listeners. Can I see fist to 5 that is completely opaque and I shouldn't have stepped into the debugger at all? Why do you do this to us, Ashi? To that was extremely helpful. Sure, close your eyes. You don't have to close your eyes. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so next up, what do we want to do next, actually? We can't refactor the whole rest of this. That's just going to take forever. We have about 45 minutes. What would you most like to see us move into this brave new Redux world? Yeah. Sure. What's a good simple piece? Albums seems pretty, albums will be satisfying. It's this nice big page. Okay, let's do albums. So what is here, and I'll turn our middleware back on. Okay, so what's the first step? What's that? Yeah, action creators. So I know that there's a whole list of action creators in the workshop. Let's just come up with them ourselves right now. So I'm going to albums. Oops, where am I? Okay, so I'm creating this file, albums.js. I'm putting it into reducers. This is slightly not what the workshop suggests, but I like to work on the action creators and the reducer in the same file because they're like really so dependent on each other. The reducer receives its parameters from the action creator, and then arguably like move out the action creators and the constants into their own files, or not, depending on your feelings. Just so the way I like to contain things is like, here's all the stuff related to the lyrics, and then now here's all the stuff related to the albums. Either is fine. They're just like where you like to find your things. Okay, so what are the things that we need for albums? Yeah, so we need like a fetch albums thing. So is that a I'm going to use a term that you haven't heard. Is that a leaf action or a dispatcher? And what I mean by that is that something that like, is that an action that has a type, or is it something that's going to call an asynchronous action and then dispatch? Yeah. So I'll just say that here are dispatchers, and fetch albums is one of them. And I guess that means it takes dispatch and does something with it. Do we want to do it now? I guess we probably can. No? Yeah, okay. Boom. I'll say this is to do. Okay, what else?
Is there a select album?
Yes. So we'll need, yeah, so for the album's single page, or for the single album view, we'll have some kind of like get the album data or like receive a single album. But just for this view where we have all the albums, I think we don't have a selected one. So this asynchronous action, what is it going to need to do eventually?
Set the state of the albums. Isn't there like on the state there's like an albums that's the array of all the albums?
Yeah, so let's actually, let's map out our initial state, which I think is it just an array? Okay, that's maybe not very exciting, but maybe we'll just make a note of it, that it's an empty array. So how do we need some way to tell the reducer, hey, here are the albums that you requested when you said fetch albums. So what do we need for that?
Don't we have this like you called it like a leaf one where it's just like a symbol, it has like a type and it just returns an object with a type and any other parameters you want to set.
Yeah, that's the thing we need. What should we call it?
Albums?
How about yeah, so in the workshop it's like receive albums. I kind of like got albums because I don't like typing that much. So here, we got albums. Here are your albums. And the action creator for that will be got albums, albums. And then the type is, yep. And then it's also going to have the payload. Okay, so this will create an action for us. And then what's the other thing we need? That's for the single album view. We're just doing the mini albums page for now. Yeah.
We also need a reducer.
Yeah. Yep. So what is that going to look like? What is it? Wait. Let's start with like, what is our reducer? It's a function that takes. Yep. or the default, right? And an action, great. And returns a new state. So it checks the type with typically a switch. And then, yeah, I guess we only have one action here that we can respond to. So when I got albums, yep. And what's that? Yep, I think that's it. And then I need to export my reducer. And we will need fetch albums in just a moment. So yeah.
On 13, is it supposed to be action.type?
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, great. So now let's fill in this dispatcher. So we are using this thunk middleware, which incidentally we don't have to use, right? Like the first step in the workshop is like don't use the thunk middleware. And then for reasons that basically it's considered nicer to have the logic of how do we like perform these asynchronous actions that eventually, I actually shouldn't call them actions because although you dispatch them, they don't ever hit the reducer, right? Your reducer is never going to get an action that is a function. And in fact, if you don't have the thunk middleware installed and you try to dispatch fetch albums, Redux is going to be like, you're trying to dispatch a function and I don't know what you think you're doing, but it's not going to work here. So this is kind of a convenience thing and a way for us to keep sort of centralize the logic of like, okay, here's all the logic pertaining to state changes about albums. And what is our dispatch function going to look like? Yeah, so we receive dispatch, and then we're going to here import Axios from Axios and say API albums, and then oh, do we need to do? Sorry, go on.
Then is that in the second then where we dispatch the got albums action creator?
Yep, exactly. That looks totally right. So all of your asynchronous, all of your dispatchers, I'm going to call them dispatchers, these async thunks, they're always going to end up dispatching something. And the things that they end up dispatching, these are what I'm calling leaf actions. I'm making the distinction because the leaf actions are the only things that actually cause state changes, right? These dispatchers sort of prepare, they like start off a process that might result in something that causes a state change to be dispatched, but it hasn't yet. A reason this is interesting is that it is these leaf actions that completely describe the state of your Redux store. So if you have a list of all the leaf actions that have happened to a store, you know the state the store is in. If you, provided you have the same reducers, you like know what the reducers are. And this again is like useful for the replayability and the like crazy time travel aspects of Redux. Okay, so this looks really good. Now let's wire this into our view. So how do we do that? Which, yeah. Yep. So let's see, where should we start? How about the app container? Or that looks like the only container around, so. Yep. All right, the app container, here we go. So this is a big file. Select album, onload artist, add playlist, etc., etc. Okay, so where do we start here? Yeah, good. So component did mount is generally always going to have our logic for loading stuff when we have stateful React components. So what's going on here? We're fetching all the albums, artists, and playlists, and then calling this onload, which sets them onto our state. So albums, oh, it is calling convert albums. Maybe we should do that in our fetch as well. I bet we won't have images otherwise. Okay, that was the thing that like nagged at me. So let's add that. Where is it? Here? Yeah. So then convert albums. I guess we need convert albums from utils. Is that right? Yeah, okay. And then we should know. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's all fine. I was not sure. So when we started off, like yesterday when we were doing this, I wasn't completely sure if res.data was actually a promise, which is part of why I did it as 2.thens, but it's not. So you can actually do all of this together, right? I could say convert albums and give it res.data right there. Yeah, the then is, I think, a bit more readable than that. So either is fine, though. Yeah. Yeah, then grab the data, then convert it, then do this. It's kind of nice, yeah. Okay, so in the app container, okay, so how are we going to do this? We want to like peel out, and let's like try and do it so that everything else stays working. I mean, that seems reasonable. Do you want to subscribe to the store in the app container, or do we want to make an albums container that subscribes to the store? Okay, wait, so which one? Put it in here? Okay. All right, we can go either way. We'll go that way. So we subscribe to the store in the same way we did before by saying, I guess we need the store. That'll be useful. So import the store from, there we go. The only thing with autocomplete is I wish it was faster, and sometimes when it's just waiting to fill in, I feel like it's my own brain that's falling apart. Like why? Like what's going on? Why? I just can't think of the word. Okay, so store dot. Okay, so we have the right store. I know that because it's telling me about all these methods on it. So I can subscribe to it, and I'll subscribe with something that says, what does this do? Yeah. And if you, there's a standard binding between React and Redux called React Redux, or maybe Redux React. No, it's React Redux. And you will, in fact, if you look into its source code, you will see exactly this somewhere deep down. And then we want to be able to unsubscribe, of course. So before we forget, is there a will unmount? No, there is not. So let's add a will unmount. And we'll do it right here. Unmount. And let's just unsubscribe us. He did this?
Here, but I'm not sure what, I don't know, I'm not sure what he did. Maybe. Do you remember, Jackie, what he did? Okay, never mind.
Is it recorded? Don't do this. if this was it, don't do this. The reason is because what if you have two components that subscribe to the store? then they will overwrite each other's unsubscribe functions, and only one of them will unsubscribe, and it'll be chaos, like mass chaos. So usually you want to hold on to your own unsubscriber. Okay, so we should be subscribed to the store. We can check that by, for example, instead of showing a sidebar, oh crap. Oh wait, I think I can, oh thank you. We can just show a pre-formatted list of this.state.lyrics, which should be whatever lyrics we just searched for. Cool. I think I have a lyrics search page that I made. So Sia, Chandelier. Yeah. Okay, great. So we are listening to the store. We verified we're listening to the store because this is coming from the store. And here it is. Okay, so now what do we do with that? Actually, I guess we don't have to do much, right? All we have to do is not do this, and not take this, and not do this, and we still need that. We still need that. We still need that. Did we ever need that? Albums? The albums component? Why do we need this? Okay, so we can maybe also remove that. That'll be nice. Okay, and if we go to albums, we see nothing. That's really, I mean, in a sense that's good, because if it had just magically worked, I would be like, but did we really refactor it? Nobody knows. Okay, I'm gonna install the React DevTools. This is crazy. Has offered by Facebook. Great, that's me. That's what I want. And it looks like I have to, oh no, there it is. Wow, I didn't have to reload. That's great. Okay. So here I am. Here's my albums. And I see nothing. I see so much nothing that it's confusing. Oh, and I'm not looking at React, that's why. Here we go. Okay, so my app container, what is on its state? Let's look at that first. I have no albums on state. Why is that? I think I know why that is. What have we not done? So what we're passing down should be okay, I think, because we are passing down props which come from our state, which includes albums, because we're like merging the store state with our own state in this like kind of hybrid system. And that actually should be okay, except that albums is currently empty, and if we look at the Redux DevTools, we'll see that our current state is, wow, it's really, really empty. In fact, there's no albums on it at all. That's even more surprising. So maybe we forgot two things. I think one thing we forgot was to attach, what's that? I think we forgot to combine our reducer. So let's do that. Oh, yep, there's nothing there. So let's pull in our albums. I kind of like to alphabetize these. That seems nice. Okay. Do we have albums? We do. Okay, so now we have albums. That's exciting. They are still empty, and nothing has been dispatched. So what are we missing now? We've not dispatched anything. When do we need to dispatch something? We actually have two choices here. So where were we fetching the albums before? Right, that's where we were getting them, but where did we make that call? Yeah. So in our app container component did mount, we could dispatch something that does that. The other option is, if you remember back to like, it was yesterday or 2 days ago, I was like, router has this like on next function that's kind of cool and you can use it to load stuff. And then I was like, oh, but this only really works if you have Redux. So the other option is to do it when we are entering the albums route. But let's do it in component did mount first, and then we can look at it in the albums route, or in on next. On next, on enter, sorry. Okay, so in the app container, so previously we had component did mount, and we were getting albums here. Instead, we need to do something here. And what is that thing? Yeah. So store dispatch, and I think we need to import something. So let's import, what is it? Fetch albums from, what did I call it? Reducers / albums. Okay, so we should be able to say dispatch fetch albums. And we've got an error. And the error is that fetch albums is not a function, which is actually not the error that I was expecting, to be honest. So let's go look at that. Why is it not a function? Because I'm not exporting it. Good to know, good to know. Okay. You know exactly where this error is being thrown from. We saw that line of code just a bit earlier. And it's kind of telling us what to do. What have I forgotten to do? You said it. Yeah, so we need the thunk middleware. Because right now what's happening is we're trying to dispatch fetch albums. So we call fetch albums, and we try and dispatch the result. Oh, wait, doesn't this have to be? There were two problems with that. Yeah, oops, there were two problems with that. So we were trying to dispatch fetch albums, which was a promise, actually, like, because I called it, we called fetch albums. Fetch albums is this function, or was this function. Here, let's do this side by side so we can see the error. So when I call fetch albums here, it's as though I'm passing in undefined for dispatch, which is, and then I do the get, and then it does all the conversion, and then finally here we get this error, which is dispatch is not a function because dispatch is undefined. So I actually screwed up twice. when typing this. The first way was not having the thunk middleware. The second is that dispatchers need to be these double arrow things. So they need to be functions that return functions. Okay, so now we should just see one error. Yep, which is, it's the same error, but it's actually for a slightly different reason. Before it was complaining because I had given it a promise, and a promise is not a plain object. Now it's complaining because I've given it a function, and a function is also not considered a plain object to Redux. So let's go add the Redux thunk middleware. Yeah. Yeah, go for it. It's very cold. It is quite cold, yeah. Wait, what happened? Chris. Chris is just always very warm. Because he's a warm person, yes. Okay, I need thunk. Where do I get thunk from? It is cold in here also, I agree. I'm standing up here in a shawl. I'm about to put on my puffy coat. Yeah, so I can... Is it just Redux thunk? I think I have to add it, right? Redux think, that's a different middleware. Interesting question. Should thunk go before the logger or after it? I'm gonna go with before, yeah. So if it goes before the logger, then the logger won't log thunks, but it will log the actions that thunks dispatch eventually, which I think is what we want. I think if it came afterwards, the logger would try and log these functions, and I've seen that happen, and it's not terrible, but it's like not actually very, it's not the most useful logging message. So let's try doing it there. I think that's all I have to do, but let's find out. Cannot find Redux thunk. Well, that was not helpful. Redux thunk. Redux thunk. Really? Node modules, Redux thunk.
In the workshop, they had you import thunk middleware from Redux thunk.
Was it destructured out? Come on.
Oh, I just meant on line 7 instead of the word thunk, it was thunk middleware.
Here?
Yes.
But was it in curly brackets?
No.
Then it doesn't matter. Then it's just the name for the default export. Here, let's see. What do you... Man. Okay, so here's thunk. This is the typings, which is super not very helpful. Okay, what are you trying to export? Lib index.js. Lib index.js. Okay, so yeah, so the default export is the middleware. So what's the problem? Did I misspell thunk? Import thunk from Redux thunk. Here is a thunk. Please thunk. What do you thunk? Oh my god. Okay, it just had to build, I guess. Yay, Thank you. I feel good about it too. Oh, sweet. And now we can see, okay, we can see what's going on. So we initialize, and then like the first thing that happens is we got albums, and here's all the albums we got it. Cool. How do we feel about that? So to review, we made our state manager file thing here. We made our albums action creators, and this asynchronous dispatcher that's going to eventually dispatch got albums. And then we made a reducer that responds to got albums and responds to it by returning a state where the albums are whatever the albums that it got were. And then we wired that reducer into the store.
Actually,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm missing something basic. Why are you returning dispatch in all of the line? 13. Why are you? Yeah, why are you returning that?
I'm not. Maybe this would be a better way to render it.
Oh.
I'm returning. So
Oh.
the arrow is right associative. So this. So like X, Y, Z. So right associative meaning, I think this is right associativity, meaning if you were to add parentheses, the parentheses would go like this. So that's how JavaScript interprets. So that is to say, this statement is a function that takes a single argument and returns a function that takes a single argument and returns a function that takes a single argument, rather than being a function that takes a single argument and returns something else, and then this arrow is kind of a syntax error, or like I don't know what it would mean. Is it right or left? Whatever, it's this associativity. That's how you read arrows. Yeah, if, here, I'll leave this as a note. So this amounts to this. And so this is a function that takes nothing because fetch albums doesn't actually need any arguments, and then returns this thunk, which takes dispatch. Also, it can also receive get state if we need the state for some reason. We don't in this case, so I'm just omitting it. But you might want to write a dispatcher that whose behavior depends on the current state of the store. All right. Questions on that? Would you like to see one more feature, or would you like to go more into depth into something we've done? Yeah.
Was a little bit lost on this workshop, and so if I don't know if anyone else is going to talk about implementing solutions to another concept or another tool, but I'd be more interested in just understanding how everything is wired together. It is a bit of a review. It is something that we've seen in the other React workshops, but maybe it'll really help dive in more to see how all of these different pieces come together.
Totally. Come together in what way? Like, how does it?
Yeah, so we started looking at albums.js. We saw taking care of the routes. It goes back to store.js. And I'm bringing this up because during the workshop, like the first couple of like introductory steps gave a really clear understanding of these are the benefits of Redux. You're going to have a dispatcher. You're going to be able to update the state and create a new state every time, brand new state. So you're not mutating it. You're just
Yeah.
Redux, so that's kind of like.
And Juke is already quite big, right? It has a lot of features, and so especially like, did anyone finish refactoring? Yeah, no, no. No, I did, and that's why like I wasn't like we're gonna refactor everything, because even if it was possible, which like probably I wouldn't have finished, like it would have been this whirlwind that who could follow it. So right now Juke is like it's in this kind of liminal state of like not everything is in Redux, not everything is in components. This is actually a pretty like common state for programs to be in, where they're not like, you know, we have the new shiny way and like someone likes it, and we have like, oh, this other way that like is the way the code base has grown. And so it's sort of your first introduction to like, yeah, there are going to be multiple patterns that sometimes solve the same kind of problem in different ways, and transitioning from one to another is not always simple. And so you sort of have to be able to understand how they fit together, or start to get comfortable with like fitting different models together. Do you have something that you'd like to see in particular, or do you just want to see the whole like flow of the app?
How many minutes it is, 5 or 4 or 3 minutes that we have left. We can, if we, at the very least, look at, okay, we have albums.js
Mm-hmm.
is a dumb component.
Yeah, so this album, okay, so we've got this album.js.
We have the dumb components, we have the smart components, which contain the routes.
Right, so we have, here, let me close that. Yeah, so our album component is, oh, sorry. This is a smart component. Why is select album? Okay, so select album is a prop. Select album causes the container to load the data for this album, as I recall. And then, sorry, were you asking about album or albums? The one we just worked on, or this one? Okay. Okay, right. So that's good because it's a little bit simpler. Our albums component is this dumb component that basically just takes a few props, a list of albums, and the select album function, and renders some JSX from it. This needs to be fed data in order to do anything at all. And most of the work we've been doing in this workshop, and the previous ones for that matter, has been like exploring different ways of feeding data to our dumb components. And so before we did this little refactor, our data was coming in. Here, let's look here. Before we did this, our albums were getting loaded in much the way that our playlists are currently getting loaded. So we were making a request to our backend in the componented mount of some container. In this case, we only have like one container that's really making AJAX requests. In other app architectures, you might have like a few containers that make AJAX requests. But in any case, and in a pure Redux architecture, you will only have these dispatchers that are responsible for making AJAX requests. So right now we have a little bit of both, which is maybe unfortunate because we have to think about both models, but it's also just an unfortunate side effect of the fact that we're kind of mid-refactor. Yeah, so when our component mounts, we kick off, so in Redux land, we kick off a dispatch, which goes and fills the store with what we need. In a sort of classic stateful React component model, we do our AJAX request and then put it onto our state. And then either way, we pass down what we need, or what the dumb components need. In this case, we're passing it down by doing this clone element thing where we say, okay, whatever child we have, we're going to give it all of our state as props. All of our state and then some. So we've made this like big object with lots of props, and we're going to pass it down. As we move to Redux, we can avoid doing this because, as we move to React Redux, we get to avoid doing this because React Redux has a way to basically say, hey, just connect this component, which can be dumb or smart, connect it to the store such that these parts of the store map to these props on the component. In fact, you give it something called map state to props, and it will go and like connect up that part of state to these props on the component, and you don't have to worry about it. But that is for next week. Yeah, Sarah.
I have just a general question of if we fully like get to the point where we fully refactor this to use all Redux, would we never use like set state outside of any of our like Redux things? Like in our containers, would we be using set state ever, or is that sort of taking away the Juke too?
Yeah, you wouldn't need to. And in fact, you wouldn't even need to subscribe to the store if you were using React Redux, because React Redux gives you this connect wrapper that subscribes to the store for you, and also actually calls set state on a like little fake component it creates. It basically abstracts away the containeriness and says like, okay, I'm going to have a container that all it does is subscribes to the store and sets its internal state to be the store's state, and renders your component with whatever props you want from the store under it as a child, much the way that we're doing here. So we're kind of showing you like behind the scenes, and then next week we'll be like, hey, look, here's this connect function. You don't have to subscribe to the store 500 times manually. It'll handle all that for you. Okay. So we are at time, and I guess it's me that's next, talking about senior phase. Oh, that was a spoiler. Crap. Any last questions before we pause? We can also look at how we would use the routers on Next to do the fetching, if anyone is interested in that. Who wants to see that? I'm not offended if you say no. Let's look at that. Let's take a break now. We can look at that next week when we look at React Redux overall.